Heads up to the listeners of the Browns Nation station. If you are looking to show your Browns Nation pride, look no further than brownsnationswag.com. They have all the latest and best fan gear to represent your team. Again, that's brownsnationswag.com. Cue the music. It's time to start the show. Welcome to the Browns Nation station. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined today by KMAX sports reporter Eric Kelly. Eric, it's been a long time since we shared the airwaves, but being a Browns fan in the heart of Texas, today's victory over the Dallas Cowboys has to feel pretty good, my man.
Yeah, listen, there are a lot of games on the schedule, 16 games every year, give or take, if you go to the playoffs. But this one is probably the one I wanted the most, considering who's around me, who pops up on my Twitter feed. It was so sweet. That first half was maybe the best 30 minutes I've had on Twitter in 2020.
That's pretty incredible, especially considering Nick Chubb went down with an injury. And I know you are a sports reporter in Lubbock, Texas. I think it's hilarious on your Twitter bio. You've got location is a state of mind. But Eric, I think today's victory, a 49-38 win over the Dallas Cowboys, is going to be remembered as the Odell Beckham Jr. game. 3 touchdowns for the Browns star receiver in this one, including the one that helped the Browns put it away in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think this is the Odell we were promised when you trade for him, a year and a half ago, maybe a little more. This is the Odell Beckham you expected. Obviously, you see glimpses of it here and there. You remember, of course, only a couple weeks ago, he had that big touchdown against Cincinnati as well. But he had the tendency to be there, to disappear, be there, disappear. And I think this was his first, consistently great game, looking like a top 10 receiver that he is, not only making plays through the passing game, but of course, maybe the biggest play of the entire game on the ground.
Yeah, Alvin Smith, the Dallas Cowboys edge rusher, very nearly had him. And I'm like, oh man, like a 15, maybe a 20-yard loss turns into a long end round touchdown that again helped the Browns put this game away. Eric, I'm going to be honest with you. I wasn't sure if I was watching an NFL game or a Big 12 game this afternoon. The fact that the Cowboys cut a 27-point deficit down to 3 points, were you sweating this one out like I was? I'm just like, what is going on here?
Yeah, covering Texas Tech on a weekly basis, my lines were getting bored a little bit. I couldn't tell if it was a Saturday in Lubbock or a Sunday in Dallas. The only reason I wasn't sweating is I said, okay, they've done this once before. They're no longer due. They got their comeback victory. So now, of course, they're not allowed to do it twice in a season, right? That can't be allowed. So, I knew my only confidence was in the fact that the Browns didn't have to really change the way they play football, which is some teams, maybe when they're more spread it out passing attack, when they start to have to run the football, that's when they get into their issues. But the Browns is just natural. They were just playing their game. It was less they were trying to run the ball because they had to. It's more they were just running the ball because they can run the ball, minus that deep shot to Odell, which he was open. I don't know how much I love those play calls, but because we're seeing it more and more. We saw in that Seattle-New England game, too, where you take a deep shot on third down. Personally, I'm a guy who just make them take their timeouts, but in hindsight, I guess it all works out. He had him. It just wasn't a good throw, but I think you saw on that last drive, Odell got the carry, but we saw Kareem Hunt come back into the game for the first time since the start of the fourth quarter. So I think at a certain point, the Browns were like, okay, Dearness Johnson, great, but it's bell cow time.
100%. And as soon as Nick Chubb goes down in this game, and if you're a Browns fan, you hope that he's not out too long, but Kareem Hunt with only 11 carries, it has to be more than that. If you would have told me coming into today that Dearness Johnson would be the team's leading rusher, I'd have thought you were nuts, or that Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt got left behind from the team playing back in Cleveland, because I would have never suspected that. But as soon as Chubb goes down, you've got to get Hunt more touches in this one. And I'll say this, it was a team effort. It was a group effort. The Browns with 307 yards rushing in this one. But the fact that it came down to a one-possession game late in the fourth quarter was troublesome for me. And we were texting some during the game, Eric, saying, where's the killer instinct? And OBJ able to put it away. That's why you pay a guy like that an average of $18 million a year to make big time plays like that. But the Browns can't abandon and get away from the running game because you see how successful that they are today. They had a stat during the broadcast saying that the Browns run the ball at the second highest frequency in the league, only behind the LA Rams, headed into this week 3 matchup. I want to see Kevin Stefanski and this offense continue to commit to the running game because regardless who's back there, the Browns have proven that they're able to do that. It helps control the clock, helps control time of possession. It gives your defense a rest, just all of the things that the running game does. And then it sets things up for the tight ends and the receivers. And so if I'm a Browns fan, continuing to commit to the running game is something that we have to see with Kevin Stefanski and this coaching staff.
I will say this in terms of a defense of the way the Browns used Kareem Hunt today. He did have a groin injury. So I think the number one what you wanted to get out of this game is to get one running back out of there healthy. And so I think the 11 touches was more a reflection of, okay, Nick went down, you're up big, just keep Kareem Hunt healthy because you can't have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb both go down. So I think that was more what the 11 touches was a reflection of, and he was successful in his 11 touches. But if there's one area where I think the Browns can afford an injury like that, as bad as it is, I think they can afford it at the running back spot because, and I'm going to say this quietly, I think Kareem Hunt might be the better of the 2 running backs. I know it might be an unpopular opinion, but, I mean, Nick Chubb, great running back, top 5 running back in the league. I might get some flack for this. I think Kareem Hunt is right there. I think Kareem Hunt does just as much for you as Nick Chubb does. And it's not a negative on a Nick Chubb. It's a positive on Kareem Hunt. He adds more in the passing game. He's got the same amount of explosiveness. He may cut better than Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's a big body and no one can bring him down. But I didn't see many Dallas Cowboys with the ability to bring down Kareem Hunt today. So while losing Nick Chubb is rough and you never want it to happen, I have no issues riding Kareem Hunt under the understanding that his groin is, 80 to 100%.
Yeah, and like what other NFL teams would you be able to say that about of, hey, your starting running back goes down, a guy that was second in the league in rushing a year ago. Now, in 2017, Kareem Hunt led the NFL in rushing when he was still a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. So he's shown that he's capable. Their skill sets are a little bit different, and Hunt, I think, is a little bit better of a pass catcher out of the backfield too, but even the Browns getting Dearness Johnson involved, Hilliard involved out of the backfield too, it's really just feed the hot hand. Whichever guy has the hot hand, whichever guy's fresh back there, and you can, continue what was a 2-headed monster coming into this game. If Chubb misses some time for the foreseeable future, depending on the severity of that knee injury, what might now be a 3-headed monster headed into week 5.
I think it's a reflection of how much the offensive line has improved, especially in that run area. Listen, Nick Chubb, second lead rusher, the offensive line wasn't very good last year. It's more a reflection of Nick Chubb being able to carry the ball and not being able to, and he being a really tough guy to bring down. But I think the offensive line has made big strides, and that's what you expect when you bring in Jedrick Willis to the draft and you pay Jack Conklin all that money. You expect the offensive line to be better. Week 1, were they? Not really. But since then, I mean, the improvement has been vast. The Cowboys have a good front 7. Their secondary isn't good, but the Cowboys have had a good front 7 this year, and I think the Browns just straight up won at the line of scrimmage. And I think that allowed a guy like Dearness Johnson and Hilliard and Hunt to run through. They even talked about, even when Nick Chubb was in there, it's not like he had to break a whole lot of tackles. He just had gigantic holes to run through.
Week 1 never happened, Eric. Let's be honest here. Week 1 never happened.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It seems so long ago. The Browns 3-1 for the first time since 2001. I think you bring up a great point with the offensive line. Question I would have for Kevin Stefanski if I was in that news conference after today's game is there was a portion of the game where Chris Hubbard was actually in the game at right tackle for the Browns instead of Jack Conklin. Conklin got put back into the game, but I was curious as to why that happened. Maybe they were trying to keep Conklin fresh. I'm really not sure. Or maybe, he had an injury that wasn't that substantial to where he needed to miss more time at some point in the game. But at one point, Hubbard was in there at right tackle for the Browns, which was kind of a head scratcher to me.
Yeah, exactly. And who knows what it is? Minor injury, keeping guys fresh. I mean, the Browns had the ball for such a significant amount of time. They really won that ball control battle day, which is what you expect with a running team. Maybe Jack Conklin got tired. I have no idea what the reason is, but as long as it doesn't keep happening 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road, I think we can just consider that a blip. And the beautiful thing about this also is we talked about, Chubb. We don't know what the extent of his injury is. He couldn't come back, and it's a knee injury, which you never want to see. But I think the Browns have the luxury now of keeping him out really as long as they want to. You don't have to bring Nick Chubb back until you're 100%. And I don't think there's any reason why you bring Nick Chubb back until he's 100%, because Kareem Hunt would start for, 29, 30 of the other teams in the league right now?
Yeah, I was confused. They even called it a knee injury because he got rolled up on. I thought it was kind of more of like an Achilles or maybe a calf injury, but the fact that they called it a knee injury on the broadcast was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I thought he was grabbing his his thigh too, or his quad too. But then I think the Browns are the ones who called it a knee injury. So I'm surprised. I don't know what had happened there.
Luckily, he walked off under his own power. So that was a positive sign there, because at first it's like, oh, man, if they go get the cart, this guy's probably done for the 2020 season. And that did not happen. He walked off under his own power, and hopefully the injury isn't as bad as it initially seemed. But Odell Beckham Jr. picked up the slack. The rest of this Browns offense picked up the slack. I think we now know what some of OBJ's cryptic tweets were. He sent several on Friday, and it's just like, dude, your team has a winning record for the first time. Your franchise has a winning record for the first time since December 2014. Like, read the room. But they got it going right away. That reverse pass by Jarvis Landry, that was an absolute dime. They've got to utilize Landry's ability in double throw situations as a left-handed thrower as well. Throw it as good a deep ball as really any quarterback I've seen in the league. It was a gadget play, a fun play, but the two LSU teammates hooking up for the score early on for Cleveland.
Yeah, this isn't the first time I think we've seen those two connect on a touchdown like that. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought they did it last year as well. It was Landry to Odell. But I was really impressed with what Baker Mayfield did today. I mean, he didn't really have to do a lot, but I think he managed the game really well, didn't really put the ball in harm's way. I think that's when the Browns are at the best. I think that's obvious. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that out. But when do they not have success? When Baker forces the ball and he throws interceptions. When are they at their best? When he only has to average, what do you average? 5.5 yards a pass, which in the NFL nowadays is like unheard of. I mean, you have guys averaging routinely over 10 yards a pass, but Baker, I think all you got to do is manage the game. And like I said, he averaged about 5.5 yards a pass attempt. Listen, I think that's all you need out of Baker Mayfield. I know he's a number one overall pick, and number one overall picks are supposed to go out there and throw 400 yards and carry the franchise on their back. And I think the number one thing Baker needs to do is not put too much pressure on himself to put up those gaudy numbers, because he doesn't have to. If he has to put up those gaudy numbers, I think that's when the Browns are going to have the least amount of success.
Back-to-back weeks, Mayfield has not thrown an interception. And entering the Week 3 game against Washington, he had 8 consecutive games with an interception thrown. And you see what happens when you win the turnover battle, what that does for your team, how that helps the team play complementary football, because in the first half, they're turning the ball over, they're taking it away from the Cowboys, and it sets up your offense with the shortened field, prime field position, and you take advantage by scoring touchdowns, not settling for field goals. And that's really the name of the game when you can play complementary football. Like, I know a lot of Browns fans want Mayfield to be that top overall pick and that blue chip quarterback. Like, Eric, let's be honest here. How many blue chip quarterbacks really are there in the league? There are only a handful.
Yeah.
You've got like Russ, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. A tier below, I would probably put Lamar, but like there are only a handful. And my point is the teams that run the ball and play sound defense, we've seen now the last 2 seasons how that's that's boded well for the teams that do that. Look at the teams that ran the ball with the most frequency a season ago. The Ravens went 14-2, made the playoffs, won the AFC North. The San Francisco 49ers, they made the Super Bowl. The Minnesota Vikings, they were a playoff team and beat the Saints in the first round, so they won a playoff game. The teams that run the ball and play sound defense do well. And I know this is such a quarterback-driven league. There's this obsession with fantasy football, but what are the things that are a recipe for success in terms of actually winning and losing? And I give Kevin Stefanski a ton of credit for this because he has committed to the running game. And that's why this Browns team sits at 3-1 for the first time since 2001. And again, last week, the fact that they have the first winning record in 6 years, that's really exciting if you're a Browns fan.
I mean, look at what the Browns have done offensively. They're averaging over 40 points the past 2 weeks, but Baker is barely averaging over 160 yards passing. So to say that he needs to have a lot of success through the air for the Browns to win is just false. He's thrown over 200. His highest passing game this year is 219 yards in 4 games in an era of football where people air it out more than we've ever seen before. And the Browns are 3-1 with a quarterback who is averaging, under 200 yards a game passing. I just think that's the beauty of the way that they play football, and I think that's the beauty of bringing I think that's why you bring Kevin Stefanski in, because where did he come from? The Vikings, who run the ball, and Kirk Cousins doesn't throw routinely for over 400 yards, and they have Dalvin Cook, and they ride Dalvin Cook, and then he comes to the Browns, where you have a quarterback where he doesn't need to throw over 250, 300 yards, but you have good running backs, and you rely on the good running backs, but you still find ways to get your receivers involved even when you're not throwing for 300 yards.
3 consecutive games with at least 30 points for the Browns. That has not happened since 1968. And that just goes to show you what this team can do. And here's the thing, too, is if you are going to throw the ball, Kadarrell Hodge had a hamstring injury in pregame. Higgins was inactive. Peoples-Jones made his NFL debut today, and it was clear they wanted him just to stick to his return duties on special teams. So, okay, say you do want to air it out. Yeah, you've got OBJ. Yeah, you've got Jarvis. Yeah, you've got the tight ends who you could split out wide. But like, if it's not broken, there's no need to run a spread system. I know Stefanski has a propensity to use multiple tight end sets, tighter offensive formations, but clearly that has worked to this point. And in that Baltimore game in week 1, when you're facing a double-digit deficit, the problem is the Browns got away from running the ball, which is this team's strength, especially given those upgrades that they made on the offensive line in the offseason. And so you establish the run, and once you establish the run, then that sets up everything else. And again, this all goes back to there's a lot of Browns fans out there that want more with quarterback Baker Mayfield. But again, if you're winning, that will all come. Like this was exactly. Like this was like the first time I've seen OBJ have fun since like last year's Jets game when he went off in one of his first games on the Cleveland Browns.
Mark, the most pathetic game we've seen from the Browns this year was the unmentionable game. When did Baker throw the most passes? In their worst game of the year. He threw it almost 40 times.
You're proving my point, my man. Let's move to the defensive side of the ball, Eric. And one thing, there were a couple things that really stood out. We could get into Myles Garrett's domination as an edge rusher, but I don't know how much I want to put on the back end, but like there's got to be more than one interception of Dak Prescott in this game. Taki had an interception go through his hands. Andrew Sendejo got beat a few times and should have had at least one interception.
He forced a fumble to make up for it. Listen, I think anyone who watches this team knows where their weaknesses are. It's the linebackers and the secondary. The secondary's beat up. We saw Denzel Ward make a great play. He's clearly far and above the most reliable option back there. But there's a lot of injury, and when there's a lot of injury, they're not going to play as well. You didn't expect to have to roll with some of the guys that you did right now. You expected to have a guy like Grant Delpit back there, and he's just not.
Delpit's a rookie, though. Like, how much were we really – I know Delpit, the Thorpe winner and everything out of LSU, went down with the season-ending injury, but how much are you really relying upon a rookie? And again, so
second-round draft pick in an area that's really bad.
I hear you, but I think this goes back to the point I was originally making is this more of an indictment on the Browns' back end, or do they need to continue to get more of a pass rush and see more guys make plays up front, putting pressure on quarterbacks outside of just Myles Garrett? Myles Garrett, we know what he's done this season as a pass rusher, but I'm talking about guys like Larry Ogunjobi, Olivier Vernon. I know Sheldon Richardson went out with an injury too. We'll keep an eye on that, but if you can put pressure on the quarterback, and if you can pressure a quarterback without having to blitz, how much easier that makes guys on the back end, how much easier it makes their job. That's just the point I'm trying to make.
And that's fair, but I feel like a lot of teams have had success just dumping the ball off for 5 or 6 yards on the Browns all day, and that's how they move the ball. I know for sure that's how the Ravens moved the ball in that first game. I mean, it's just a fact that the key to beating the Browns on their defensive side of the ball is just to get the ball out quick, because the linebackers in the secondary just aren't as deep and aren't as good as you need them to be, and you have to rely a lot on, like you said, the pressure, but there's ways to beat pressure. I think you just need that linebacking core to be better. I mean, you lose Joe Schobert, who was easily your best linebacker last year, and I think it shows. Listen, you have some decent linebacking depth, but you got guys who wouldn't start on a lot of teams. I mean, Malcolm Smith was out of the league. And he made a play last week, but he's a shell of what he was when he was a Super Bowl MVP. I mean, Taki, solid, but like he's not a top end linebacker. He's not a guy who I would want to ride in with in terms of 4 or 5 years down the road. I'm just saying, like, I just think it has to be better, especially against these teams where they can negate the pass rush.
You heard it here first. Eric Kelly claiming that he has better hands than the linebacker Taki. You heard it here first on the Browns Nation station.
I didn't say that, but sure, I'll roll with it anyway.
That's what you're implying, my man. Okay, let's go to good call, bad call. My good call is the team's decision to stick to the run. We've kind of outlined that thus far, Eric. My bad call, Donovan Peoples-Jones. This is in the fourth quarter. That crazy voodoo kick that Greg Zuerlein had, and the Cowboys very nearly recovered it. And thankfully, the ball rolls into the end zone for the Browns for a touchback. But the rookie has to know the situation that he has to field that ball, because if it does not roll into the end zone and Dallas recovers, they have excellent field position. And so that was my bad call, and understanding the situation there. I'm sure that's something that this Browns coaching staff will clear up during this next week ahead of the Colts game in Week 5.
My good call is that drive right before halftime. You're up 28-14, but getting that field goal right before halftime, you have about 4 minutes left when you get the ball. Some teams would stay aggressive. Some teams would be happy with the lead. You're getting the ball out of halftime. So I think there would be coaches out there who'd be like, we're up 14 on the road. Let's just not make a mistake, and let's get the ball back after halftime. But I love the aggressiveness by Stefanski saying, no, let's drive the ball down the field and get as many points as possible. And in the end, you look at when the Browns got the ball before that Beckham touchdown, how much were they up? 3 points.
Yep.
So it all comes back. So that was probably one of the best calls, was to stay aggressive and to get those points right before halftime, even though you knew you got the ball after halftime and you could have just sat on your laurels and said, we'll just take the ball after halftime.
And then scoring on that first drive out of halftime too. And so you build an even bigger lead. And the Browns at one point scored 34 unanswered points. Like, Eric, I've been on this planet now for 27 years. That's a sentence I've never heard before.
Don't age yourself too much there, Mark. Bad call. I want to go with the Peoples-Jones like you. But technically, it did roll into the back of the end zone, so he lucked out barely. My bad call, listen, I get wanting to be aggressive. I just don't understand a deep shot on third and manageable. The Cowboys are using their timeouts. You haven't run any time off the clock. Just go with something safe, maybe a run-pass option, a rollout, something that gives you the ability to, if the pass isn't there, take the time.
That's an excellent point. And look, a lot of teams, when teams will stack the box, so they'll put 8 of their 11 defenders in the box to try to prevent the run. What you've got to do in that situation is run some sort of quick pass, either a slant or a screen or a bubble screen that almost serves as an extension of your running game. And you can do that with a Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr., or you can run a quick swing pass to a Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. That's something I'd like to see the Browns do. Again, I love their decision-making to commit to the run, but when teams do stack the box, inevitably thinking that they're going to keep it on the ground and keep the clock moving, I'd like to see the Browns in their quick passing game almost let that serve as an extension of their running game. And instead of trying to take a shot downfield with Odell Beckham Jr., like we both know we'll take OBJ one-on-one on the outside in most situations. But
again, I feel bad harping so much on it because he did beat the corner. It just wasn't a good throw, but he did beat the corner. And if he lobster right in there, we're saying, oh my God, that's the greatest call I've ever seen. It's so good.
But it's the circumstance. It's the circumstance of the game more so than the player's ability to execute it. Whether we're talking about OBJ or we're talking about Mayfield's ability to deliver that pass accurately. And so that's where you've got, if that's the decision that you're going to make, you've got to be able to execute in that situation. And the Browns didn't. Thankfully, it did not end up costing them, though. Very nearly did. It very nearly did. So that's an excellent point.
I want to stress it's nitpicking at this point because there wasn't any game-losing play. So you got to nitpick and find the ones that.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Eric, is better teams, good teams will take advantage of that. I said this going into the game. I believe that the Cowboys should have been 0-3 entering this game, if not for that crazy comeback a few weeks ago against the Atlanta Falcons. And again, you saw Greg Zerloin's voodoo kick where no one knows how to respond to it because it spins and wobbles in a weird way because he doesn't even use a tee sometimes. He just kicks the ball and it just wobbles and spins in a weird way. You've got to be able to account for that. And it was like I said off the top of the pod, I wasn't sure if I was watching an NFL game or a Big 12 football game in this one because it had a little bit of everything. This game was absolutely wild. If you're a Cowboys fan, Eric, I'll say this defense is pretty brutal. Dallas has allowed 38-plus points in 3 consecutive games. Only the second time that's happened in Cowboys franchise history. It's the first time since 1960 when the team went 0-11-1 in their first season in the NFL. And so Dak Prescott has 450 yards in 3 consecutive games. He's the first player ever to do that. He had more than 500 yards in this one in a losing effort. But man, if you're a Cowboys fan, we're going to hear it all week on a lot of the national shows about Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys and what's gone wrong. But it's awfully hard to win a football game when you allow 49 points. I don't care what team you are, and I don't care how potent your offense is.
Their secondary is really bad. And I will say this about the Browns defense. I can be critical, but they were on the field there, especially in that fourth quarter for so long. You didn't know how much of it was just when the Cowboys throw as much as they do, they're going to have success at some point. So as critical as I was of that secondary and of the linebackers, I mean, Dak does this to a lot of people. So it's not like this Browns defense is awful. There are obviously a lot of room for improvement. But again, Dak does this against everyone. So you can't get too critical. And they did take Zeke out of the game there, especially in that first half. Now, of course, in the second half, with how much the Cowboys are down, that takes Zeke out of the game naturally. But I think the Cowboys did do a good job kind of stifling that Dallas Cowboys running attack.
It's crazy, though, Eric, because ahead of this game, I thought, okay, from the Browns' standpoint, if Dallas does make this game a shootout, I actually like Dallas more in a shootout than I did Cleveland. But the Browns just put up so many points, and the Cowboys dug themselves such a deep deficit. Again, down 27 points. The fact that the Cowboys even cut it to 3 in the fourth quarter is pretty remarkable. And this game was kind of a tale of two halves because the Browns go into halftime with a 31-14 lead. And like you said, Eric, I know you had tweeted this out. It was like, man, this is one of the best first halves of Cleveland Browns football that I can remember.
Yeah, and I think it's you talk about how you would probably take Dallas in a shootout. I think a lot of people would, just because when you think of a better attack, when you think of a shootout, what do you think about? It's two teams throwing the ball on each other. But this is almost a different type of shootout because it's a type that the Browns got up so much that they could run the ball down the Cowboys' throat at will. And that's the type of shootout they can win when they get up and can continue to pile it on by running it down an opponent's throat. What I'm worried about, and it's the same thing that I think a lot of people are worried about with the Ravens, is what happens when this team gets down 10 to 14 points. I know they got down a little bit against Washington and were able to battle back, helped out by turning Dwayne Haskins over. But if this team gets down 10, 14 points against a really good football team, are they able to battle back? If we see, are they going to continue to stick with a running game in that area? Or are they going to completely abandon it? And then are we going to see Baker have to throw the ball 40 to 45 times, which I think you and I and most Brown fans would agree is not a formula that's going to lead to very many wins.
Eric, you brought up a great point earlier. I would have loved to see what time of possession was by half, because the Browns had the ball for 33 minutes and 27 seconds out of a 60-minute game. And just the way that first half went, it seems like that time of possession was well in their favor. Again, winning the turnover battle, the Browns did not turn the ball over today, and they had 3 takeaways against the Cowboys. How that consistently leads to success when you win the turnover battle as well.
I'm going to say the time of possession, when you just look at it, it almost looks in the first half like the Cowboys might have had the ball for a little bit longer. But here, the key situation was touchdown, fumble, touchdown, fumble, touchdown. That's where the game – I mean, you can say whatever you want about time of possession and all that. The game changed when the Cowboys were able to have the ball for 5 plays and then fumbled the ball 2 plays back to back, because that kept the Cowboys defense on the field. I think the Browns just really ran it down their throat. And I think that was what ended up. If you look at it, it's a long game, but I think those 4 possessions back to back to back were what ended up allowing the Browns to win this game today.
Yeah, Sendejo did redeem himself in forcing that fumble of Zeke Elliott. And I'd like to see these young playmakers on the defensive side, I'm talking about the linebackers and a lot of the defensive backs, really start to gel as we move into the coming weeks. We're now a quarter of the way through the season. A lot of these guys are young players trying to establish themselves in the league. And so you develop some of that continuity, some of the playmaking and ball hawking ability of, again, if you can win the turnover battle, what that does for your team. And we certainly saw that in the first half. Eric, week 5, the Browns will have the Indianapolis Colts at home. I'm curious to see how the Colts play this afternoon. And originally they were going to play at 1:00, but with the some of the NFL games getting bumped back, some canceled, the Bears now playing the Colts in the later slot this afternoon. So that game is now underway. And in the rest of the AFC North, the Bengals getting their first win of the season, and the Ravens also took care of business as well. The Steelers are not playing in week 4 because of the Titans pandemic, COVID-19 outbreak. And so I'm curious to see what the Colts do this week against the Bears. I know they've got a young running back in Jonathan Taylor, the rookie out of Wisconsin. I'm curious to see how effective he could potentially be against this Browns front, but I want to see how the Colts fare kind of before I can really make any kind of predictions and break down the week 5 matchup against Cleveland.
What I'm really worried about, and this is just me looking and seeing he already has a touchdown against the Bears, is Mo Alley Cox. He's been one of the kind of surprises of the NFL season so far this year. Played basketball at VCU, then made the move over to tight end. But what scares me is a team that has that type of tight end, that type of reliable tight end, him and Phillip Rivers, what they do against this Browns linebacking core. Because we even saw what Dalton Schultz, the backup tight end for the Cowboys, was able to do at times against the Browns. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup. And the Colts, number 1 defense in the NFL right now. Granted, anyone who plays the Jets is eligible to be up there near number 1 in terms of total defense. But I'm interested to see kind of who wins that battle on that side of the ball, whether or not the Browns can run the ball as effectively against the Colts as they have everyone else. And you talked about that D-line. D-line matchup's going to be interesting against the Colts O-line that is really strong. Myles Garrett, $125 million. I'd pay him $400 million at this point. The way
Oh, wow. See, I thought Patrick Mahomes is still underpaid with his massive deal, but you're arguing for Myles Garrett's sake. So I hear you. I hear you.
I think he's underpaid. I think you look at how he wrecks games. What's that? 3 strip sacks in 4 games. I mean, what more do you want? He continuously wrecks the game. He forces double teams. He opens it up for everyone else on the talented D line. I think you're going to get every penny's worth.
And he's cat-like off the edge in the sense that you'll see some guys just go for the big hit. You'll see them just go for the sack. For him, it's almost like an art form how he's able to – you can see how cognizant of the ball that he is. And so he's not just going for the sack or the bone-crushing hit. He's really trying to get that strip sack or a deflection, an interception, fumble recovery. It's really – it's beautiful to watch. It really is.
Comes down to the fact that he's a freak of nature. He's strong. He's quick. He's got good hands. I mean, he's got everything. You drafted him number 1 for a reason, and I think he's showing it every single game.
I cannot wait to see him in a couple of weeks. We've got the Colts next week, but in that game, his first game against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a few weeks, that is something I've had circled on my calendar for some time now, just considering what happened in the brawl with Steelers backup quarterback Mason Rudolph a season ago. The Browns and Steelers played since then, but Garrett was facing his 6-game suspension, or what wound up being a 6-game suspension. So he has not played Pittsburgh since that brawl. So I cannot wait for that one, but he's playing awfully good football early on in 2020 after getting that massive extension. And certainly it's one of the bright spots on the defensive side of the football for the Cleveland Browns.
Mason Rudolph's going to be sitting as far away from the sideline as humanly possible.
EK, before signing off here, just kind of final thoughts. Like, you must be over the moon just because it's been so long for this Browns team to develop into a winner. Obviously, Ohio State's not underway yet. We knew the Bengals were going to struggle this season with the rookie quarterback in Joe Burrow. But, like, how you feeling, man? Like, this has just got to be such an exciting time for you.
This is what last year was supposed to be.
Yeah.
You talk about that. I mean, it's not. I don't want to say it's surprising because it shouldn't be. You look at all the talent that this team has on the field. I think it's just finally you found a guy who was able to utilize it. And I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit worried after week 1 in terms of, oh God, here we go again, because this is how you are supposed to be pessimistic until you see otherwise. As a Browns fan, it's how you're raised. It's how you grew up. It's what you were told to do. So I saw week 1 and I was like, okay, maybe they aren't good again. But I think we've seen the real Browns team the past couple weeks in terms of, I mean, this team is talented. Like, let's not beat around the bush. Good drafting equals good talent. And you talk about guys they bring in are finally producing. So I'm excited because there's a lot of winnable games on the schedule. You talked about that game against the Colts. That's going to be a tough one. But you look, then you have the Steelers, winnable game. The Bengals, Raiders, Texans, Eagles, Jaguars. I mean, you could easily lose, 1 or 2 games, but win the rest on that stretch. I don't think there's any reason the Browns shouldn't easily get into the playoffs this year. I think you talk about schedule. They get to play the Giants and the Jets this year. That's Christmas morning for a fan. And that's at the end of the season. 2 of your last 3 games are against the Giants and the Jets. Like, I mean, that you don't want to seem overconfident, but you chalk that up as 2 wins right now. Like, and you think about the way the playoff bracket is set up too. I just don't think there's any way that the Browns. I'm going to come back to regret this being on tape, but I don't see any way that the Browns don't make the playoffs in the year 2020. But I said that prior to 2019, and I've said that prior to many other years too.
Let me go back to something you said earlier about last season and how the Browns were the sexy pick for a lot of different people. And it goes back to odds makers had the Browns as the favorite to win the AFC North. If you look at the odds from August 2019, that was certainly the case. I said this going into this year, that the AFC North is an absolute gauntlet because, okay, we know what the Ravens did a season ago. We know what they've done through 4 games this year. They're at 3-1. Steelers look like they're legit. They play a really good defense. Granted, The 3 Steelers wins have come against teams that have a combined record of 0-9 thus far, but they're 3-0, sitting at their early bye week, just given the postponements related to COVID. But this Browns team's finally starting to put it together with a roster where you look on paper, the game's not played on paper, but okay, you look on paper, it's like this is an AFC Pro Bowl roster. And you're in a division that's one of the most competitive in football in the AFC North. I think maybe the best division. It might rival the NFC West because the NFC West is an absolute gauntlet. But you bring up the great point, Eric, in that the expanded playoff format is only going to help the Browns team this season. Remember, this will be the first year where each conference, the AFC and the NFC, will have 7 teams per conference make the postseason. And really, that's the big question that the Browns have is, can they finally make the postseason for the first time since 2002? It's the longest active playoff drought in the NFL.
Mark, here's what I say, though, about why you should be positive, why Browns fans should be positive when something that they haven't been able to do in 20 years. It's the fact that when do the Browns play their best football? At least the past couple of years. It's been at the end of the season. They struggle like heck out of the gate. They can't get a win. They fall down to 3rd or 4th in the division. And then for some reason, they finally get it together. Why were they such a sexy pick at the start of last year? It's because, one, you got Odell Beckham, but how'd they play at the end of the year before that once they inserted Baker? They won a bunch of games.
Yeah.
This team seems to always, for some reason, struggle out of the gate, and then they finish off strong the past couple of years. So now they're starting off strong. All we need is them to put it together and do what they do at the end of the season, which seems like they should be able to. It's win all the winnable games. That's what the Browns, for some reason, haven't been able to do the past couple of years. They lose these winnable games, and you wonder how the heck did they just lose to this team? Right now, they're winning the winnable games. They didn't trip up against Washington, which, let's be honest, they would have done in the past. They beat Dallas, which I don't care what the odds maker said with the 4.5. Like, that's a winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
They're not tripping up in games that maybe they would have in past years. Even Cincinnati. Listen, Cincinnati stinks and haven't beaten the Browns in a year or two. But Cincinnati is another one of those where Joe Burrow is just about as impressive a rookie quarterback as you'll see right now. That's a winnable game, but one in which you would have seen maybe the Browns trip up. So it's about just winning the winnable games. You win the games where, listen, I'll just say it now. The Ravens are just a juggernaut. Will you beat the Ravens this year? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, the second game is at home, so maybe you have a better chance. Maybe not in the COVID era. But you look at all these winnable games. You have to win 80, 90% of the winnable games, and you're in the playoffs. Games you, for in any way, shape, or form, should win. Raiders, Bengals, Texans, Eagles, Jaguars, Giants, Jets. These are not teams in which you're like, oh, maybe if we really play our best football, we might sneak it out. This is where you can play a C game, and your talent alone should be able to win those games. And all you have to do is win 80 or 90%, and you're in the playoffs.
They had the stat on the broadcast. The Browns entering this one were 1-18 in their previous 19 games played in the month of October. And so really this month is going to be huge and a huge stretch for the Browns. EK, before signing up here, is there anything else you want to plug, anything you want to add? Where can people find you on social media? Just tell our listeners where they can find your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Eric Kelly TV. I don't think you necessarily want to because the content's not as good as I try to make it seem on this podcast, or as Mark tries to see when he plugs my tweets in the podcast. It's not as good as it seems, but I just want to say go Browns. Like, in the end, go Browns. Let's give this city a winner. It seems for some reason that, like, as a guy from Cleveland, 30 minutes east of Cleveland, I could like root for any of those Cleveland teams. 2 of them had success, had a lot of success in the past 5 years. One has not, but for some reason, the team I care the most about is the one that sucks. I think it's just a natural thing where you just want the team who just really hasn't been good to be good, so you can say that I was there from the start. But I don't know why. I just want the Browns. I would trade everything else the Indians and Cavs have done just for the Browns to be successful. I can't keep replaying that Tommy Maddox, Kelly Holcomb playoff game as the last one I remember. I just need a new one.
It's human nature in that you want what you can't have. But EK, this has been so much fun, long overdue. Eric and I both attended the University of Missouri, and I know we had done some radio.
By the way,
work
shout out former Tiger Alden Smith for missing that tackle. He knew. That's school pride right there.
That's Mizzou made. All right, Eric, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. For KMAX Sports reporter Eric Kelly, I'm Mark Bergin. Thank you for listening to the Browns Nation Station. Go give us a 5-star review. Please rate, review, and subscribe. I'll see you next week. Take care, and so long, everyone.